Today we have all of this amazing FOSS software, which unless you're doing professional work where you're required to use a specific application, all of these can serve as really great alternatives. So things like GIMP for doing image editing, we have Godot if you want to do any game development, if you want to do video recording or live streaming. Basically, everyone uses OBS, and for 3D modeling, you can use Blender, and Blender is definitely used in a professional context as well. And the reason why any of these projects can even exist is because of community support. And one of the biggest ways you can actually support a project outside of obviously developing for it is with monetary support. When you think about FOSS software, you probably think about some of the massive projects like Blender, GNOME, Ubuntu, Firefox, KDE. Some of these projects that are so massive and so well funded that they can actually afford to employ people full-time, and because they can do that, they can actually make this software to the point that people who have no idea about FOSS software and couldn't even remotely care about it are likely going to be using some of it. Now, if you want to go and support these projects, this video isn't going to say you shouldn't do that. If that's what you want to do, it's your money and it's your time, feel free to do that. But what I wanted to say is that most projects are not like this. If I was just pulling a number basically out of thin air, I would have to say that 99% of the projects on GitHub, GitLab, and various other places you can store source code probably have basically no funding and are just a volunteer effort by a single person. And the problem with solely volunteer efforts is there's only so much time in the day you can dedicate to something that isn't making you any money. And if it is making you any money, maybe it's making you like $5 or $10 a month, which is by no means enough to actually take time off work to actually dedicate to a project. Now, if you're, say, in high school or university, or maybe you're even younger, maybe you're in like middle school or something like that, maybe then, yeah, you actually could dedicate considerably more time because you have much less responsibilities you actually have to worry about. But once you're working full-time or even part-time, it's much harder to find time to actually work on a project. Now, even with a project like, say, this one right here, the Olive Video Editor, this is probably in the top 1% of funded projects with $634 a month. And at that point, you probably could say, I'm going to take a couple of days off a week and actually work on the code base. But even at this point, it's not enough to actually fully dedicate your time to actually working on the project, which is making the next update of it take considerably longer than it's supposed to be taking. And this is a problem that every single project faces, some more than others though. I could probably sit here showing you Patreon pages of projects all day with $1, $5, $10, $7, $0, $20, but that's not fun to look at. So what I wanted to say is that if there is a project that you really, really like, such as, for example, the Olive Video Editor, which is something that I really want to get better, but it doesn't have to be that. It could be, say, a replacement for Xrand, or it could be a rewrite of the GNU utils in Rust. It could be really anything that you want to support, anything that you think deserves your money. If you have some spare change, then I really suggest actually donating to some of these projects, even if it's like $1 or $2. Even something like that is a massive help for any project out there. And that's not to say that if you don't donate to projects, you're somehow, a bad FOSS supporter or a bad Linux user. I fully understand that, especially right now, there's a lot of people who just don't have the excess money to actually donate to random projects they're using. But if you do, and you feel like a project does deserve some sort of support from you, then most projects on their GitHub page or their website will probably have, a Patreon link or a PayPal link or some sort of other link that you can use to actually go and support them. Now, if you don't have the excess money to actually go and support a project, or maybe you like a project, but you don't really feel like you like it enough that deserves a donation, there is another way you can actually go and support basically any project out there. And this is one of the nice things about working with open source software, and that is that you can donate your time. Now, if you have development experience specifically in the language being used in the project, and that is something that's very important, please don't go and bother projects when you have, say it's a Rust project, for example. If you've never written any Rust, I wouldn't recommend going and, trying to develop for a big Rust project, because you're just going to end up getting in people's way. They're not there to train you. It's not like you're an employee of a company. Make sure you actually have experience, at least a little bit. It doesn't have to be, hey, I have 5 years experience in Rust or anything like that. At least know enough where the development experience you do have actually can be useful, most projects have some way to onboard new developers. So sometimes it'll be through, say, a mailing list or an IRC chat or a Gitty matrix. Doesn't really matter what it is. Different projects will use different things. Some of them even use Discord, even though an open source project probably shouldn't be using Discord. And also, some projects are a bit more insular in the way they operate. So they have a specific culture they want to maintain, and people who don't fit into that culture, they're not really as accepting to bring into the project. Other projects, on the other hand, happily accept anyone who has experience that can help. And usually you can find some information about this on whatever website they're storing the source code on. But even if you don't have any development experience, or maybe your experience is minimal enough where you can still read the code and still understand what's going on, but you don't know enough to actually implement some new functionality, there is another way you can help, and that is because most projects are seriously lacking in documentation. Because I've written code before, documentation is boring, no one wants to do it, and I fully accept that. So if you want to help out in some way, that is something you can typically do. Now, some projects choose not to have documentation. Suckless. Most other projects just don't have them because the devs just really don't feel like doing it. So you can help out with things like, say, the man pages, like any good Linux project should have, the README, the project wiki on the actual project's website, or maybe even go outside of the project and do something on, say, the Arch wiki or the Gentoo wiki or any of these other distro wikis where a lot of people will go as a secondary resource outside of the main project's documentation. Now, occasionally when people come across bugs in a project, they'll go and submit an issue on the GitHub page or the bug tracker or whatever it is they actually use to keep track of issues with the code base. But the problem that most projects have is that most of them don't have someone that dedicates their time to trying to break the code base. They don't have someone there to actually be a bug tester. And a bug tester is someone who is really, really important to any project, because the problem that I've found whenever doing any development work, or this is a problem that anyone else has as well, when you make code, you typically think that it's perfect because otherwise you wouldn't have written it. You're not going to intentionally write code that has a bug in it, so it's very difficult to actually come up with the conditions that can actually break your code. Whereas if you have someone outside of yourself looking at it, they will typically try things that you had never thought of. Now, if you are someone who is a developer, I would suggest really taking those issues seriously, because I've seen so many projects that really just blow off any of the bugs that get submitted about it and say, nope, that's not a problem, I'm not dealing with that, no, don't care about that. Even if it's not that important of a bug, at least keep track of it, and then later down the line, if it's something you have time to work on, then go and work on it. Don't just throw it away as if it doesn't matter. And if you are submitting a bug, please ensure that you actually provide sufficient detail. I've seen so many bug reports that are just like, I was using this, it broke. They didn't say, what distro they were on. They didn't say what they were doing at the time. They didn't say maybe what else they were running, what their hardware was. They just basically gave the absolute minimal they needed to give. And that's not very helpful, because the biggest problem with actually trying to address a bug you know about is knowing how to recreate it. Because if you can't recreate it, then you have no way of actually working out what's causing the bug. Most projects that take bug reports seriously will have some sort of standardized way to do a bug report. So it'll be like, what were you doing? What were you running? What other things are important? So on and so forth. Fill out the template as it makes sense to fill out. And then also don't provide too much information. So if, say, a system log at the time is going to be relevant, then provide a system log. But don't just provide a system log for literally no reason. People are busy. They have better things to do with their time, so there's this sort of window where it makes sense how much you should be giving. So don't give too little, don't give too much. If you do give too little, though, most developers will follow it up with, hey, what else was happening at the time? And if you're someone like me who likes to make videos about software, make blog posts about software, you can do things like, say, tell people what they can do, why they're a good solution, who can benefit from them, and even though promoting FOSS tools isn't directly going to be supporting the project, what it is going to be doing is getting more eyes on it. So that will then encourage people to do things like, say, donate to the project, or write documentation for it, or develop for it, or do any other thing that can support these projects. So if you do want to go make a blog about, say, GNU utils written in Rust, One way you can do that is over on Lenode. If it runs on Linux, you can run on Lenode. They have the distros you'd expect available, like Ubuntu and Debian, but also Arch and Gentoo, because why not? They've got multiple server plans available, so whether you want to host a blog or a personal VPN, you know there's going to be one that fits you. Going forward, I'll be using Lenode to host all of my community game nights. If you need help, Lenode has 24/7, 365 support available by phone regardless of your plan size. So right now, you guys can get started on Lenode with $100 credit by going to the link on screen or in the description down below. Lenode was in the game 3 years before Amazon entered cloud computing, so you know they know their stuff. A huge thank you to Lenode for sponsoring the channel. Now, as I said earlier, I genuinely don't care what project it is that you want to support. That is not the point of this video. You can go and support Red Hat for all I care. That doesn't matter to me. If you like a project and you think it's worth supporting, there is always something of value that you can do to actually help that project out. So thank you guys for watching. Before I go, I would like to thank my supporters. So a special thank you to Chris, Joachim Donald, Michael, Andre, Nathan, David, Montezar, Will, Chico Bento, Joseph, Mitchell, Peter D, Tony Tushar, and all of my $2 supporters. If you want to go watch my podcast, that is Tech Over Tea, available basically anywhere. And then this channel is available on Odyssey, Library, and BitChute if you want to watch on a platform that isn't YouTube. So I think that's going to be pretty much everything for me, and I'm out.